tonight we're talking about the game Snakes and Ladders, and that's the title for the evening. I don't know how many of you played Snakes and Ladders as a kid. Yeah, I see heads bobbing here. Yeah, a lot of girls. We played that game. Definitely such a great childhood game, but it was so frustrating because you're moving along and you're getting it. If you get ladder after ladder and you're moving up, and then all of a sudden you end up on a snake and you just like go sliding all the way down, and it's just so frustrating. And if you're like me at all, I am super competitive when it comes to board games. I don't know what it is within me when I'm playing games, and not even so much, well, a little bit with sports, but not even to this extreme. I don't know why board games and anything like that. I just get so competitive. I want to win. Now, I'm not a sore loser, but let's just say that I gloat when I win. I am terrible. I will rub it into your face if I beat you in a board game. And our family, we're all pretty competitive. So, a friendly game of Monopoly or Snakes and Ladders can turn so fun where we're like, just really trying to take the other person out. So, but there's just something about that is like our lives, where sometimes you're up and sometimes you're down. And the game of Snakes and Ladder, you can be up and down numerous times. And so many board games are like that, where there's this, a back door kind of thing where you're going fine for a while, and then all of a sudden, like, you end up in jail in Monopoly or whatever, and you're waiting to get that get out of jail soon card. And but life can be like that. Life can, be this experience of where everything's going along fine, and we just think we've got the world by the tail, and then all of a sudden it seems like the bottom drops out and we are down a slippery slope like that game, where all of a sudden we're no longer at the top, but we feel like we are at the bottom, and life just kind of turns on us. And I love how the Bible tells real stories. I love how the stories of the people in the Bible we can relate to. We can see how they experience the same things as us. And I want to bring you into a story with Jesus and his disciples, and this a time in ministry where they were up at the highest of highs, and then they crashed down to the lowest of lows. And so you can see that they got through it, that you can get through it, and maybe some tips on how we can actually learn to live, in the high highs, low lows, and get somewhere in the middle where those things don't rattle us. So if you have your Bibles tonight, I'd love for you to take a look at Matthew chapter 8. And we're going to kind of go through, I'm going to highlight a few things in there before we get to May's testimony. But I just want to take a look at what this time frame was like for Jesus and the disciples. Okay, so we're going to go all through Matthew chapter 8. So we won't make Jen like write all the scriptures down, but you can just follow along in Matthew chapter 8. Okay, you can write some other scriptures, Jen, but this would be too much for you. But in the very first verse, I want you to kind of get a feel for what was going on. In Matthew 8 verse 1, it says, and he came down from teaching on the hillside. Massive crowds began following him. Just picture this. Jesus, he's like the rock star of the day. Okay, he is on the hill. There are massive crowds of thousands and thousands of people. We've heard the stories about the feeding of the 5,000, and they tell us that was 5,000 men. So who knows how many women and children, what the total number of people were. But this experience, you read through the New Testament, and you hear repeatedly, them talking about the size of the crowds. The disciples were really obsessed with the size of the crowds. They were. They just, like, if you read, especially Mark, who is, I don't know, that guy likes action, and he doesn't give a lot of the details. He's just like bam, bam. He's got the main points, and he uses these incredible, exciting words, but he's always talking about the size of the crowd and how massive the crowd was. And there was a large crowd, and this, he's got all these adjectives to describe the crowd. But right now, Jesus is like at this really high point where so many people are following him and the disciples are along for this journey. And have you ever been a part of something where it's growing and people are following and it's very exciting? Well, that's what was going on at this time. So it's all good. They are on the up and up. So then verses 2 to 4, all of a sudden with this massive crowd around, a leper walks up to Jesus. And this is taboo, absolutely taboo in their culture for a guy with leprosy or a woman with leprosy to actually be in town and to walk up to a rabbi. That is like not what they would do. But this guy comes and he says, Jesus, I know you have the power to heal me. And Jesus heals him. The crowds are going crazy. They're loving it. They are just amazed that Jesus healed the leper. And it doesn't end there. The crowd is whooped up and they're so excited. And the disciples, they're Jesus posse. They're hanging out there and they're with him when all of this great stuff is going on. And they hear the cheers of the people in the crowd. And then in verses 5 to 13, there's this Roman guy. He comes up and he is a leader in the Roman army. And he comes to Jesus and he tells him about how his son is sick and dying and he's going to die. And he says that he has faith that Jesus can heal him. And, we read this in 2021 and we don't really understand how big of a deal this is, that a Roman centurion would come and he would ask a Jewish guy to heal his son. And then Jesus goes, and in verse 11, he begins to prophesy about how that the salvation is going to come not just for Jewish people. And for a long time in the Old Testament, the Jewish people tried to keep God to themselves. And their whole calling was actually to be a light to the world, to be an example to the world. But unfortunately, they had shut everyone out and they had kept Jesus, they had kept God for themselves. They were waiting for the Messiah and, they weren't sharing with others. But the word was getting around when Jesus was there. And so this Roman leader comes in and he says, you don't even have to come to my house to heal my son. I know you have the authority. All you have to do is to just say it and my son will be healed. And Jesus tells him that because of his faith, his son would be healed. And immediately they got word and his son was healed when they went back. At that very time that Jesus said it, the son was healed. Crowds are just like so excited. And this news that, wow, this gospel, what Jesus is doing is going to actually spread around to the whole world. Jesus is talking about this here. Everything is new, exciting, and the disciples are there for the ride and they are loving it. They love the crowds. And then verses 14 to 17, they go to a town called Capernaum. And when they're at Capernaum, things get really crazy. This is one of the very few points in the Bible where it tells how Jesus goes and he heals everyone there. There are times where Jesus healed some people, but this is one of the few times where Jesus walks in and he heals every sick person that is there. So can you imagine what this would be like? The energy of the crowd, they would just be so excited and the disciples get to be part of it. They are flying high. I can only imagine being a part of this. I'm thinking about my racetrack days and growing up at the racetrack. And, when my parents' race car would be winning, you would just be so excited. You'd, be cheering in the crowds and to be a part of it. I remember, my sister and I sitting in the back seat when you would, take the car down to bring the race car back at the end of the track. And you would be so excited to be a part of this winning team. And that's what the disciples thought they were part of. And they were. But then something changes. And it's in verse 18 where it's like, and all of a sudden, all this starts to change. So if you want to look at verse 18 there, okay. And it says, it says, at the sight of large crowds, gathering around him, Jesus gave orders to his disciples to get ready and to sail back over to the other side of the lake. So right in the middle of all this exciting, great stuff, Jesus tells his disciples to go and to get a boat and travel across to the other side of the lake. This would have been anticlimactic, I'm sure, for them. They're like, no, I don't want to leave. Like, this is the most exciting point. You just like healed all these people, and everywhere we go, people are following, and it's exciting. And they go onto this boat. They follow Jesus' orders. They get onto the boat. And then verses 23 to 27, we see how from the really high of highs, it goes down to the low of lows. And it says they all got into the boat and began to cross over to the other side of the lake. And Jesus was there exhausted. Could you imagine, after preaching all that and walking through all these towns and healing the sick, he's exhausted and he falls asleep in the boat. When suddenly a violent storm developed with waves so high that the boat was about to be swamped. Yet Jesus continued to sleep soundly. The disciples woke him up saying, "Save us, Lord, we're going to die." But Jesus reprimanded them. "Why are you so gripped with fear? Where is your faith?" Then he stood and rebuked the storm and said, "Be still." 2 words. That's all he said. Be still. And then he stood and instantly it became perfectly calm. The disciples were astonished by this miracle and said to one another, "Who is this man that even the wind and the waves obey him?" So they've gone from the highest of highs to the lowest of lows, thinking that they're going to die in the middle of a storm, in the middle of a lake. It would be so scary. And life is like that for all of us, where it can be going along and things are good. And then something changes and our life spins on a dime. And, just like that game of snakes and ladders, it goes sliding down. And I'm going to invite May to come in and to join me talking now. And May is, this young, beautiful girl. And if you look at May, you would imagine she's just got this perfect life because, she's just so pretty and young. And, I'm sure everything's working out for her. And well, I just want to tell you, this girl has experienced some of the deepest heartaches that, some of us in our not later years, but older than May, quite a bit older than May, have experienced. But May, thank you for being here and thank you for coming and sharing your story. So how old are you?
Well, you never ask a woman how. No, I'm kidding. I'm 25. I just turned 25 on September 30th.
Wow. Okay. So I think, between you and Shauna, you're representing the young 20-year-olds. So we are glad to have you here. But, sometimes people can look at young people and they kind of dismiss them, that they haven't gone through things in their life and think that they don't know what it's like to go through hard times. But you are not someone who has had it easy. So you maybe just tell a bit about your child, what turned your life around, you went from something really good childhood to difficulties.
Yeah, I mean, every time I want to share my testimony, I kind of sit there and I go blank minded because I go, I have no idea where to start or what to emphasize but then I remember that all I need to do is pray and say, okay, God, just let me know what you want me to say and I shall share that. So the first thing I'll say is that you're telling that story about Jesus in the boat, and I'm kind of here going, what, like, wow, because I just wrote a blog post. I am a blogger, uh, and I wrote a blog post on that not too long ago, and so I was just trying to find it as you're speaking. But I guess going off of that, yeah, so I am 25. I am an only child, and my parents are from the Philippines. And so they came here in the 1990s. And so I am first what's it called?
First
Uh,
generation.
First generation Canadian, woohoo. And so my dad was actually a pastor in the Philippines, and he tried to start a church here, but it's just hard with English also being your second language. Um, and so I grew up in a home of faith, and I'm really grateful for that because it has clearly shaped me into becoming who I am. And so I guess fast track to, I guess, 2010, my dad actually got Parkinson's. And so it's pretty uncommon for people to, I mean, usually men get Parkinson's. It's really uncommon for women too. But to get Parkinson's, you usually don't get into later in life. And so he was about 40. So he got Parkinson's, and my mom and I noticed that his behavior started changing, and so it just became normal, the new normal. And then August of 2013, his mom, so my grandparents, they're all in the Philippines. We went back to the Philippines because she was dying, and she had lymphoma cancer. And so we kind of went into it knowing that she's going to pass soon. And I think that was my first encounterance of facing death right there. And so both sides of my family, thank the Lord, are very in their faith. And I'm, again, very lucky to have that growing up. But again, it doesn't make it, I wouldn't say it doesn't make it any easier, but it's hard in general. And so we were there when she passed away, and it was actually around my birthday, and my birthday wish was for her to blow my birthday cake. I think must have turned like 15 or something. And so she actually stayed for that, and she passed away the next day, so that was really special. And so only a couple months later, we were back here in Canada. And so my dad was totally fine when we were there. And we were having kind of a Christmas dinner, October 2013. And we were having my friends say, "Oh, Edwin, that's my dad's name. Sorry, Edwin. It looks like you kind of are. The side of your face is kind of like sloping." So I forget what it is, but in order to see if you've had a stroke, you kind of do like I don't know what it is. You touch your nose and see if you can't do it. And so he wasn't able to do that. And then I just remember how great day. Oh, and I was like, oh, okay. But to my mom and I, everything was very just normal because it became very normal. So we rushed to the hospital. And then next thing I know, we my mom and I got pulled into a room, and then they had the ground, and I was just like, we were just having dinner. Like where did this all come from? So from that day on, we were in and out of the hospital. In the meantime, I was in grade 12. So I was trying to catch up from going to the Philippines and dealing with my grandma passing away. And then my dad was in the hospital now. And so um yeah, so we were in and out of the hospital, not sure what was happening. I feel like, I guess relating it to the game, I feel like that was a huge ladder right down, because a lot of my memories, I feel like, are blacked out. I don't know what that term is, but I've been realizing the more I've been healing that there are times during that period where I really just cannot remember, and I think that is trauma. Um, and so, anyways, during that time, uh, a couple months passed, and so they said the brain tumor is inoperable, and so we'll have to send him to a specialized hospital. And in this area, it was called Jervensky in Hamilton. And so I remember it was the night I was able to apply for university. And so I said, okay, well, I finally have some time to apply to university. Crazy me wanted to apply to university while my dad was in the hospital. But so I applied thinking, this is a normal thing. I want to do it. And so as soon as I submitted that application, we got a call and said, yeah, my dad's not doing well. So we rushed all the way from Guelph to Hamilton. And I remember it being the worst ride of my life. I think I used 4 Kleenex boxes to myself. And yeah, so we got there. My mom was with him this whole time. And I just remember the sorry. We were pulled into the ICU, and again, fast track. The doctor pretty much told me bluntly that you're saying that your father doesn't have that much time to live, and saying that to a 16-year-old that just has not really any idea what's going on. You could have said it a bit nicer, but doctors have to say it that way. So I remember it was like a movie. I just shot out of that room. I ran down the halls and I was just crying. And I was like, Lord, I need you. I have no idea what's happening. You can't take my dad yet. Our family is only 3. Why do you have to take him? He's a pastor. And so obviously all these things. And yeah, it was a time where I've never felt that my faith was shaken in terms of God, you weren't there. It was more of a God, I need you so much that I have no idea why things are like this, but I need you more than ever right now. And so it came to the day where the doctor had to sit down my mom and I and say, well, the only reason your dad's living is because he's on a machine. And so it is up to you guys whether we take him off the machine or not. And I remember just being blank and saying again, like, Lord, I have no idea what to do. And so we thankfully, since my dad was in the ICU, he was in a coma pretty much. It just went downhill after the brain tumor, pneumonia and all those things. And we were lucky that he was able to respond still. So we said, Dad, you really don't want to leave us yet, right? And so we were still joking with him, even though we're, in this really hard time. And so we said, if you can hear us, squeeze our hand. And so he's able to kind of move his hand. And then we said, okay, he's still here. And then we just had time with him. We prayed and I sing. So I was able to sing and I got that from him. He sings and plays guitar. So I was singing. And so we just had an hour with him. And then after that, after praying, we said, okay, if you really think it's your time to go, or not think it's your time to go, or if you are okay with going home to the Lord, and if you are ready, which he says he's always been ready, then you can squeeze her hand. And so he squeezed her hand, and I was like, that's not what I wanted you to do, but and so it got to a point where we got annoying and we were laughing and we said, this is what you want, and he wants to go in peace and not hooked up to the machines. And it was just heartbreaking seeing all the tubes, and that was the only reason he was alive. And so the day came when we had to be pulled aside, and they said it will be a miracle if your dad is still alive once we pull the tube out. And so we prayed before we left. And we said, if this is really what you want, could you please try to stay back before you leave? And so when we came back after they pulled the plug, he opened his eyes, and even the doctors were shocked. And so we said, you know, we prayed for a miracle. And so it was my immediate family and my immediate cousins, and we were all around him. And he was able to open his eyes somehow, and he just looked around the room, and it was such a surreal moment. And yeah, because all the doctors said he would have been gone. And so it was just that little glimpse of, you know, happiness in that moment. And the last person he looked at was me. And so that was really heartbreaking, but at the same time, it just we're just really thankful we had that time with him, because I know a lot of people who've lost someone tragically or just really quickly, they didn't have that time with them. So I will forever be thankful for that. So yeah, I usually wouldn't be able to talk about that part of the story without bawling, but now I can do that. And so moving on to that, I was able to sing at my dad's funeral. And so I sing on worship team at my church, and now I lead worship team. And with God's strength, I'm able to do that. And so uh,
How much does worship play into you being able to get through difficult times like this? Because I know your story. I know that the passing of your father is just one of really difficult circumstance that you've gone through. So what are some of the tips that someone could be listening to your story and thinking, how could she, you know, keep trusting God, keep having a relationship with God, and keep, you know, how did you keep that relationship with God when, you know, you went from this loving home to now not having your dad?
yeah, um, I would say that, you know, there's depression and anxiety. It's definitely real. I
Mhm.
feel like it's more real. It's unfortunately more uh, prominent, more common than usual with everything that's going on in the world right now. But I remember being ashamed. I remember being very fearful in being a Christian and having my faith and still being depressed and still needing help. And so my mindset was, Lord, if I have you and if I have strength in you, then why am I depressed? Why am I anxious? And so I had a really hard battle, inner battle. And so I realized many years later that that's not how it is. I am human.
Yeah.
And
Body,
we're
soul, and spirit, right?
yes. And so it's okay to have those feelings, and we need to work through those feelings. And so I wrote down here, you cannot heal without fully going through, without working through those things. And so um, the past 6, 7 years of my life, after my dad passed, I went to university right away. I had toxic relationships. I had school stress. I went through grief the wrong way at times. I, you know, just went through all of it. I was deemed with severe depression, and I was just in a whirlwind. Again, snakes and ladders. I was up and down and up and down, and I feel like, and my mental health took such a toll. I don't know how I graduated in 4 years, but I did.
And then you
um,
got your dream job working
yes.
at Mission Ventures. So it seemed like, okay, all this struggle, you know, you're losing your father and everything. And then the job was like very exciting. When I first started with Missionary Ventures and we were going to Kenya, our group, you know, you were our point of contact and things. And all of a sudden you started having these migraines that were debilitating.
Yeah.
And it was a time where all that stuff that you had gone through, your body was just really struggling.
Yeah. And so your body definitely uh, talks to you, if that makes sense. Um, and um, yeah, like life always seems to throw you a curveball. And I always said, oh, not another one, or oh, what now? Or, and I don't think that is the way to live, because then you're always expecting, oh, when's the next one? Or when's the next thing I need to be worried about or anxious about? But now I see it as, that's life. And, life isn't perfect. People aren't perfect. We live in a sinful world, and God told us that. But you know what? We have we have God's word. We have the faith that he has given us. We have the ability to trust in him. And so my favorite verse is actually Proverbs 3 verse 5 to 6. Trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge him, and he will make your path straight. And that is a verse that has stuck with me the whole 6-7 years of my life, because I cannot do anything alone, and I have tried and it has failed many times. And even with the migraines and everything, I have no idea why it happens, but then some fruit comes out of it. And so I have a small business now called Beauty in the Chaos. And the concept is that with everything I've been through, I believe that there is always, always beauty and blessings within the chaos of life. And so, out of my, I'd say, out of the healing and or the pain and whatnot comes healing, but also comes blessings and fruit. And so I'm just thankful for everything I've been through, because then I wouldn't be able to also sympathize with other people or be able to actually apply the things that God teaches us.
I think it's so beautiful how you are that example of when we have a faith that can handle the ups and downs. It's not like you don't struggle, that you didn't have, reactions to it. We have to, in order to heal, you have to feel, you have to go through those emotions. You have to go through grief when you lose someone. But understanding that you've come to at such a young age that, it takes some people till their 80s to figure this out, that life is going to be this series of ups and downs. And if we expect that it's always going to stay up, well, we're going to continually be upset. We're going to be continually disappointed, and not, we're going to hold it against God that it's like this. But we're in a fallen world. And so I think that was, you've learned this at such a young age, and the disciples had to learn this. They were really sometimes clueless. It took them a little bit longer sometimes to pick things up. They're just like us. But you have really learned this at such a very young age. And I know that God is going to continue to help you go through things. I think of, through this time where you had these terrible migraines, you had to step out away from work. You weren't able to work. And for I don't know how long it was, almost a year.
Yeah, it was almost a year,
Yeah.
sadly.
Yeah. But now you're back working full time. And in this time, you got engaged to your wonderful boyfriend.
Yes. God is good. I will say that, sure.
But I think there's something
Oh.
there. Oh, there's the pictures. Okay, Jen's got the pictures. Look at that cute couple.
Yeah, so I mean, relationships, that's a whole other ballpark.
Yeah.
But that too, you need to put God in the center of that too. That is for sure.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for telling your story, sharing a little bit of your story, because I know there's lots more to it. Everyone, you can't fit a whole story in 15 minutes, but it's just amazing to know you're an example of how we can have faith when things are going well, when things are not going well, and encouragement. I think, you are a worshiper. You love to worship. And I know that when we worship, it alleviates so much stress in our lives. And when I look at Jesus, who was, with the disciples here in this storm, and he is sleeping in the middle of the storm. And I just want to leave you guys at the end here with just 2 quick points of how you can actually get through the ups and downs of life, that you could be like Jesus. And if you want to be sleeping in the storm, in the middle of the storm, that you are so at peace that you can fall asleep. Because I think for me, that's a really difficult thing when I'm emotionally stressed. Falling to sleep at night is the biggest difficulty I have, or I don't know, one of the biggest difficulties. And not getting enough sleep leads to a lot of other things. But to have that peace, I think Jesus never fed off of the crowds. He never fed off of the part that everything was going good. He didn't expect it to always be like that. So he wasn't, knocked off his feet when things didn't go well, like when the storm started. And I think for us, a verse that we can hold on to is Proverbs 4, verses 20 to 23. Because sometimes we might not, have the crowds cheering us on, but we might be listening to the voice of people in our lives, or maybe we're listening to a negative voice in our head that is, the circumstance when it goes down, that we start to get even lower down because we're listening to the wrong people. And I just want to read this verse here for you. So it is Proverbs 4, verses 20 to 23 in the New International Version. It says, "My child, pay attention to what I say. Listen carefully to my words. Don't lose sight of them. Let them penetrate deep into your heart, for they bring life to those who find them and healing for their whole body. Guard your heart above all else, for it determines the course of your life." Jesus spent time with God. He didn't feed off the crowds, and he spent time with his Father, so much so that whatever other people said, whatever was going on, the circumstances of his life, they weren't what he focused on. It was whatever his Father was telling him. And if we can keep the words of our Father in our mind, that's what's going to help us to get through no matter the difficulty. No matter when the carpet feels like it's been pulled out from under you, you can get through it because God is with you. His presence is with you. He's given you his word. You can it's an open book test. You can just open up his word. It has so much for you if you just let it speak into you. And so that's the message for tonight, to help you to deal with the ups and downs of life.